it's been very interesting to be the person who everyone pointed to and said, you helped win, and then not have them critique it. And then later, when Trump's people did largely the same thing, everyone said, oh my God, they're the devil.
Yeah, it's funny when you do lectures. I mean, there's no excuse for leaving a stage.
What do you mean?
I mean, if you're a keynote speaker,
Yeah.
there's no excuse. I mean, you can't just say, "Excuse me, I'm just going to go to the bathroom."
No.
It's not going to happen.
You cannot. And it's being a keynote speaker is a funny identity. And I think so. I started back in the day as a street performer, as a juggler. And the thing about being a juggler is on the street is that everyone hates you. You have an adversarial audience. And I think oftentimes as a keynote speaker, sometimes you're speaking to people who do not care. And so you have to be, so for me, I have to make it very entertaining or very funny or try and I have to entertain someone. And oftentimes that's myself. And hopefully other people find it funny as well. But I try and do entertainment more so than I try and have a really strong message. If there's a message that people can get from it, that's great. But more than anything, I just want them to have fun and feel like we're hanging out together. But it is a funny thing.
So you mean you can't overthink too much and adapt too much to the audience?
Well, I think you can always get stuck in a cycle, and of course I was too. Like this was a very special talk because I did not a similar talk, but I did a different talk 5 years ago, and so now is an opportunity to kind of reflect on that time. And so for me, it was a new concept, a new topic, and scary. But it's not that you can't overthink it; it's that you still have to have that core. It still has to be a good talk, even if you're overthinking it. And some people, I think sometimes, especially people who are new or people who are, the audience doesn't care about you. So they really want you to succeed. But if you fail, they're like, I'll never see that person again. So you really have to, like you said, you can't just, I got to be right back. I got to go to the bathroom or I'm hungry and sometimes it's nerves. Sometimes it's, it just didn't work. Like I've definitely done talks where I'm like, well, that didn't work. And you just kind of, sometimes I think in an hour, I'll be done and no one will remember me. That's like the worst case. The best case, in an hour I'll be done and you get to meet dozens of really amazing people who are going to either maybe complain to you, or maybe you should have talked about this, or maybe they're going to say, have you thought about this, or give you new ideas. But that's the best case. And I think this was that. Like there's so many great people who wanted to interact and chat and maybe offer critique or give me ideas or just have a conversation. And I love that. That's my favorite.
I did a talk 2 weeks ago, or a week ago, and it was Monday morning, and immediately after the talk, I was like, "Thank you, bye-bye," and then I jumped into a cab, went to a funeral, and played a song by The Grave with my guitar. That was kind of, it was kind of weird clash between two worlds.
Which one were you more nervous for? I would say for The Grave. I would be much scared about The Grave.
Yeah.
Because it's important. Like the talks are important, but I think in many cases, and maybe this conference is a little different because it seems like a very genuine conference, but in many conferences, I don't think it's important. Like if I didn't show up, the conference would still go on. People would still live their lives. They'd still think about it. But like with a funeral, or a wedding, or many of these other kind of points in life, it's the only one that happens. So it's really important. I would be very nervous.
Yeah, it was nice. It was beautiful. Anyway,
what song did you play?
a Swedish song by an old singer-songwriter.
Dancing Queen.
No, not Dancing Queen. That would be inappropriate. Yes, exactly. So, for a bit of context, we're at Internetdagarna, the Internet Days in Stockholm, with Harper, keynote speaker, and entrepreneur and technologist and former CTO of the Obama campaign in 2012.
Correct.
And the podcast is Heja Framtiden. My name is Christian von Essen. And you mentioned that you maybe developed something that would be for the Obama campaign that would be used in a different way 4 years later. How do you feel about that now?
It's confusing. I mean, the story is that we developed all this really great technology, some really cool stuff to help elect Barack Obama, and then a lot of that same technology was integrated into Trump's campaign, Cambridge Analytica stuff, a lot of the misinformation campaigns. And we see it all over the internet today. And I don't think we necessarily invented it directly. We used technology that was available. So obviously it was there. It was already invented. But we demonstrated a style of politics or campaigning that I think was unique, which was using and doing micro-targeting in a very direct way on Facebook towards people. And so it's interesting because we thought we were just trying, we thought we were copying advertisers. We thought we were doing what everyone was doing. And when we got out of the campaign in late 2012 and 2013, I remember talking to some of these ad agencies and they were like, oh no, we've never done that. And we were just like, wait, what do you mean? Like we thought that was part of the game. And they were saying, oh no, that's never happened. And so that was very complicated because we realized that we would build something new. And then we realized that, I wonder what will happen. Because it's not so much the cat was out of the bag as much as we accidentally built a foundation of which things were built upon. And so, yeah.
It's kind of funny because I listened to a podcast that you joined called Track Changes, where you mentioned the irony that when Obama won because of social media, everyone was like, oh my God, you're a genius. This is amazing. And when Trump won because of social media, it was like, oh my God, the world is going to end.
Well, I think it's very beneficial towards me, right? Because I get to be a genius. And also the thing is funny is like, for the most part, the social media stuff was done not by me or my team. It was done by some great people, Laura Olin, a few others on the campaign. And then even the micro-targeting stuff was not really done by my team. We built the infrastructure to support it, but we didn't actually do the work. That was done by Dan Wagner and his team. But the thing that's important, I think, is that we oftentimes, we celebrate, I'm trying to think the right way to say this. It's been very interesting to be the person who everyone pointed to and said, you helped win, and then not have them critique it. And then later, when Trump's people did largely the same thing, nobody knows if it was effective or not, same with us, everyone said, oh my God, they're the devil. And I don't really want to draw the conclusion that we're the same. It's very nice that we're very separate. I enjoy that quite a bit. But I think it's important that we critique this, that we think about why was it okay for us to celebrate the same stuff in 2012, and why is it not okay now? And there's a bunch of options. One is that our guy didn't win, so we're mad. But I don't think that's it. I think it's actually that the internet society as a whole has changed a bit, where in 2012, there was still this kind of tinge of techno-optimism. Uber wasn't really big. We didn't have a lot of the big tech issues. WeWork wasn't huge. Like all these things that now we're just like, man, WeWork was a nightmare. Like these things that people are making commentary on. A friend of mine, Mike Isaac, just did this great Uber book, and it talks about all these very complicated things about Uber that's complicated, like it's good and bad. But in 2012, it wasn't now. It wasn't that time. And so we didn't have a more nuanced way to talk about these things. It was more binary. Yes, it was great. Whereas now we're thinking, well, maybe it's not as great. Maybe there's some good parts, but maybe some bad parts. And maybe we have to be careful about privacy. That just wasn't a conversation.
Well, it seems like a backlash now because many conversations here are quite dark, actually. When it comes to privacy and big tech and monopolies and integrity. And you also mentioned that we have to start talking about these issues. Aren't we talking about them?
I think we are. I don't think we're acting on them. I always think the people that should have the voice, the loudest voice, are the people who are most vulnerable. So today, maybe those are the people who are, being persecuted in Hong Kong, the people who are creating ways so they don't get face recognized, who are trying to defeat these algorithms that the Chinese police are using. Maybe the people who should have the greatest voice are the people who are not able to get mortgages because they don't fit the algorithmic profile. Because I think right now the voices are often people like me. Like, I'm a fairly well-to-do white male entrepreneur. Like, why is my voice more important than theirs? It shouldn't be. And I think what we need to do is we need to listen. I think we're hearing it a lot, but I think we're hearing it from the wrong people. We're not hearing it from the people who actually feel it and know it. We're hearing from it from these theoretical people like myself, which is good for me. I enjoy it. But I often wonder if maybe I'm not the best voice to talk about it because, and not that we should just ask the vulnerable to stand up and say, but I think those folks have been saying these things for years and we haven't listened. And so instead we're listening to people like me. When I think those people have a better, more authentic point, they have a more real point. And oftentimes they're the ones that are actually going to make a difference, or if we let them, and I hope we let them.
Yeah, that's something I think about a lot when people are talking about innovation and how open-minded they are in organizations and they celebrate diversity and stuff like that. But do they really want diversity in a genuine way?
Yeah, this is a really complicated thing. I remember talking to an executive from a very well-known Chinese company, and I was asking them about diversity, because diversity is a really important thing for me, and making sure the teams I work on are diverse. And he was like, nah, diversity is bullshit. We want to work very hard and work a lot, and I do not care what you look like or where you come from, as long as you work hard and work a lot. And I thought about that, I was
saying the same things.
Well, I was just like, okay, I agree. But what I found interesting is he was overt. He wasn't saying anything bullshit. Now, I think what he's not also acknowledging is that the power, the situations of power that create environments where engineers are predominantly white males. Like, he's not acknowledging those systems of power that are not allowing people of color to stand up, or not creating environments where people of color or women feel comfortable. You have to acknowledge those powers as well as have that attitude. He only had the attitude, I don't care. But it's also this kind of idea of meritocracy, which I think has shown to be bullshit, where the smartest people will come together, but as long as they belong to this specific club, as long as they went to this specific school. So it's not actual real meritocracy. It's like this fake bullshit meritocracy. But what I found very interesting is it challenged me. It said to me, if you just get people and they work really hard, won't you be successful? Regardless of what they look like? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. But I think you'll have more success if it's a diverse team, because you have different cultural contexts. And in this world where we're talking about AI a lot, you have to have those people to make sure that you don't make terrible mistakes. I think it should be a requirement. But yeah, it's really complicated because your competition may not care. And so they may say, fuck it, we're just going to hire, all these people, we're just going to work them to death. And you're trying to hire people who are going to make the best team because you think it's going to make the best product. And so I think it's worth it. I'm willing to take the time and the effort and get it done. And I think we all have to. But it's tricky.
I think we also see now the evidence to back it up. Business-wise.
Absolutely. I mean, there's lots and lots of documentation that diverse teams create better products. A friend of mine is a VC, and he was saying that all of his women-founded companies that he invested in have returned way more than the male-founded companies. And he's just like, statistically, within our fund, the women-founded companies are just returning way more. And I don't know if he learned that he should just invest in women. I don't know what he takes away from this. But I think the documentation is very clear. Diverse teams create better companies. I think the complication thing is we have not yet broken down the systems of oppression that keep people out of tech. Those are still there. And I try and do my part, but I don't think it's as clear as I wish it were.
Yeah, you mentioned a funny story about Chinese face recognition software that would determine your age just by analyzing your face.
Yeah, there was a startup in Chicago, really great startup. This Chinese startup, really, they were, you know, when you meet a startup and everyone is really smart and you're just like, these guys are going to go somewhere. It was kind of that. And it was a funny thing because no one really understood what they did. I did because I just was excited about it, and I spent a lot of time with them. And they were so funny and young and bright, and like they were really, you could tell there was no limit. And I think that was the exciting thing, that you saw them and you were like, okay, they're gonna do something. They're crazy. They're fun. But they built this selfie camera, and when you took a picture with it, it said your age. They brought it in to show us, and I took a photo with it. And of course, they showed me how it worked, and it worked perfectly on them. And then I took a photo, and it said I was 300 years old. And we all just kind of laughed. And basically, the story is that they determined that they had not yet tested it yet on anyone but Chinese people. And what I like about this story is so often when we talk about bias in AI, or we talk about training bias, we talk about these really terrible examples of like Google accidentally tagging black people as gorillas, or self-driving cars hitting black people more than white people. And these are terrible things, and they should never, ever, ever have happened. They should never have gotten as far as they got. But we often, or the examples are typically, especially in the U.S., very much, they're a very specific time. It's more about direct racism. And it's important to talk about, and we have to talk about, but I don't think that's where it's limited. It's in every community. If we don't have a community that is incorporating diversity in it directly, and that community is building tools, then those tools will have bias, and in some cases, overt racism. And we have to be very careful about that. And this Chinese startup was great, really great startup, hilarious. I love them. They're very successful. And yet they made that same mistake, and they were really smart. And the mistake was just they were all Chinese working together really hard trying to solve this thing. And then the thing is they didn't publish it. They went through, they saw it didn't work for me, and then they fixed it. They started testing it with more people. They started testing it on different folks, trying to solve the problem. So when I say mistake, it wasn't actually a mistake. They were actually doing what was right, which was testing it on their community, on their network. I just caught it before. But in many places, people don't catch it. They just launch it because they're so myopic. They just don't, I don't know why.
It seems like in the US, maybe in particular, or well, here as well, technology has enabled polarization when it was sort of supposed to do the opposite. How can we take back the amazing opportunities that lies in these social networks and in tech?
I don't know if I have an answer for you. I do know, I think you're right. It has, created more polarized communities. Things seem a little bit more tribal. But I don't know how to solve that problem. Some people talk about filter bubbles. Some people talk about how we need to integrate and maybe listen to other people who disagree. But I think it's a little more complicated than that, because especially online, politics have become so divisive that it's not about listening to people who slightly disagree. It's about listening to people, or what people suggest. It's like, well, like for instance, I have many friends who are trans, and I don't really care to listen to people who are anti-trans because they think my friends shouldn't be humans. Like, that's not collaboration. That's not listening to a different view. So it's like, fuck those people. It's hard to get over that. And it's hard to create an environment where we got to hear both sides if the other side is anti-human in some way. And I think that's where we're at, is we have this really interesting place where the polarization is if it was just about, fiscal policy, or it was about light social policy, or I could imagine a conversation would go fine. But I have a really hard time when it is about dehumanizing a population or saying that certain people don't deserve rights. And I think that's the issue that a lot of people run into, which is like right now it is Thanksgiving in the U.S. And one of the parts about Thanksgiving in the U.S. is a lot of families get together, a lot of the old folks get together with the young people, and there's always this thing about politics over the Thanksgiving table. And the problem is that it has always been contentious at Thanksgiving. And I think it's because suddenly the old folks have access to the young folks and the young folks have access to the old folks. This has been since I was a kid. However, now it's like that on the internet. Everyone has access to everyone. So I guess I would posit two things. One, it's very hard to have a nice conversation that isn't polarizing or divisive if people are talking about removing rights from someone else. And two, maybe it has always been polarized and maybe it has always been divisive, but it hasn't been documented and it hasn't been upfront. And that being online has done what it has done for many things, which is give more people access. And it has made some of these communities pop out and have the same level of access as the communities that are against or for.
Since this podcast has a sort of optimistic foundation for the future, what do you look forward to when it comes to a positive future?
So I think about this a lot because when I speak about these things, I'm typically not so optimistic. And so I wonder, I'm like, well, if you're not optimistic about the future, why live? Not that I should kill myself, but like you have to live for something. You know, you have to have some sort of optimism. So I think of it a little bit like this. I think we are on the cusp of a couple options. And I think the options are, do we want our society to look like Mad Max? Or do we want our society to look like, I guess, REM? It's the end of the world as we know it. And it's this funny thing of, I think the world ends constantly. I think the world ended when the internet started. The world ended for the Industrial Revolution. Like, it just reinvents itself. The previous way of things stops and the new way of things starts. And I think what we have to figure out is, do we create a world of opportunity or do we create a world of limit? And I think right now we're seeing what happens when we create a world of limit. And I don't think people actually want that. I think they want opportunity. But opportunity right now is just not evenly distributed. So we just have to figure out a little bit how to distribute it more. And I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are, because that's my world. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying to create opportunity. There's a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying to create money. The ones that are trying to create money, I think we saw that a lot in like Adam Newman with We, where they were just trying to generate wealth. That's cool, but it's not really helping anyone. And then you have places like Slack, who's trying to generate opportunity, or Shopify, these companies that are like, no, we just want to make it so more people can, PayPal even, can make money, or more people can solve this problem. Those are the ones I really admire and I really like. And so I think there's hope, but I don't think there's a place for techno-utopianism. And I think that's where when I talk about these things so critically, or when I talk about these things and I don't lead a path down for hope, it's because we spent so long talking about this utopia that we were going to get with tech that it hurt us. And I don't want to make that mistake.
So what's your best tip for making the world a better place?
Best tip for making the world a better place? I don't know. I think actually I do know. The best tip, I think I have two. They're going to sound silly. Three maybe. I think the first one, it's like when you're on the plane and they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself before the others. You know what I'm talking about in that safety video? I think we need to start taking care of ourselves more, because I think if we take care of ourselves more, we can start taking care of our communities more if we are healthy. So I think self-care, it seems like a fad right now, but I think it's so important. Whatever that means for you, it doesn't matter. For me, it means sleep. I think if I get sleep, I'm a better person for everyone around me. And I think if everyone were to figure out how to be a better person, then I think the community itself would be better. The second thing is, I would say just turn off your notifications on your phone, because it decouples you from a lot of big tech's algorithms. Because big tech sends you something it wants you to click. If you click it, they show you an ad. And it's a cycle that's very hard to get out of. But if you turn off notifications on your phone, you have a couple things where maybe you don't get your email notifications, which is complicated if you're in business or if you need emails. But it decouples you from that cycle. And I think it makes people a little bit more present. It doesn't mean that you won't stick your head in your phone and be gone. It doesn't mean that you won't interact on Instagram or whatever. It means that you're making a choice about it rather than the company or the app making a choice for you. And I think what that means is that if everyone were to do that, we would have to change how these apps work, which I think would be good. Those two things seem very simple, small things. Take care of yourself, and then, more importantly, decouple yourself from these algorithms. Notice I don't say just delete your Facebook account or delete your Twitter account, because for some people you can't. Like, that's important. Maybe it's the only way they talk to some friends. Maybe they have someone that's really important to them that only uses that. But I do think by disabling your notifications, you've decoupled some of the control aspects. And there's a lot more on how you can decouple yourself, but that's, I think, a good start.
You said 3.
Oh, no. Yeah, there's probably a third one. I always say, whenever I talk to people, I always say, don't eat the pizza. Because there's always pizza around and you eat it. Oh, it's always free. Does this happen here?
Yeah, maybe at offices, and when you're moving or when you have after work celebration or something.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's so bad for you. Like, pizza should be a special thing every once in a while, not, it's just bad for you.
Yeah, that's a great tip. You also mentioned listening in your talk. I mean, if you work with companies that have users, focus on the user experience.
Yeah.
And the user experience is, it doesn't matter if it's a company or if it's a political campaign or if it's an organization or if it's social welfare or anything. But could that be the 4th tip?
Well, there's this hilarious thing. I think this is one of my favorite things, which is oftentimes when we come to tech conferences, it's all these people and we have all these cool things. Maybe we have a startup, maybe we have an app, maybe we have a company we work for. It doesn't matter. We're all equal in one thing. None of us actually interact with the users. I think this is hilarious. Like, we are here to build something. Ostensibly, we have a game, and there's people that use the game, but we have never talked to the people who use the game. I think this is hilarious. Why? Why don't we? They're the only people that matter in our game. They click on the ads, they play the game, and yet we don't know who they are. And not everyone, of course. And so what we do typically is we hire a user experience person. And then we relegate the users and interact with the users to the user experience person. Well, I would challenge that everyone at your company should be a user experience person. And yes, of course, there's someone that has that title, and maybe they have a slightly different workflow, but everyone should be engaged in that, in user experience. That's the only thing that matters. If the user has a bad experience, then the CEO has done a bad job. If the user has a bad experience, then the engineers have done a bad job. Everyone has done a bad job if the user has a bad experience. Yet, we say, oh, well, we only have a user experience person. And so what I do whenever I give a talk, I always like to say, who here is a user experience person? And typically 1 or 2 hands go up out of 1,000 people or 500 people. And I just think that's hilarious, where it's like, we're all user experience people. Like, how do we make sure that when someone says, are you interested in user experience, that you're like, yes, I am. As a CEO, I'm very interested in making sure the users have the best experience. I am a user experience professional. I just think it's ridiculous. And so listening is obviously part of that, because ultimately user experience is about making sure that the experience is very good. And the only way to find that out is to ask and to listen and to watch how people are using it. And yet we never do that. So I think that's probably the most important thing you can do if you're building a company or an experience or an app, is to really get feedback, ask. But the most important thing about that is you have to listen. You can't just talk.
Do you have a good reading tip?
Reading? Books? Oh my gosh.
Or it could be a podcast or anything.
No, I have so many. So my website that tracks all the books I read is called reading.lol. And I post every book I read there. And I just finished a new book by Murakami, which was very good. But I think in regards to kind of this type of stuff, I think the best book to read right now is Super Pumped by Mike Isaac. It's about Uber and kind of their conquest for the world. It's very good. It's an easy read, very nice to read. And it talks a lot about that kind of startup world. And so it's fun if you're interested in that. In a kind of a speculative future way, there's a really good short story called Goodnight Melancholy, and I forgot the author's name. but you can Google Goodnight Melancholy. It's a Chinese author, and it's translated, and you can read it for free. It's on the web, and it's absolutely amazing. And I do adore that short story, and it talks a lot about mental health and technology in the future. And I think it's an interesting way to speculate. But yeah, reading, I love reading. We should do another podcast all about reading books.
Yeah. I mean, some people are really stressed out when I ask this question, because I ask it to everyone. Some people are like, I never get the time to read, and some are like, oh my God.
That's all I do.
Yeah. Who do you think I should interview?
Who do I think you should interview? Give me a little more context. Directional or...
It seems like you have lots of interesting connections. Maybe you could get Barack.
I don't think I could get Barack. He's a little bit he's a little far away. There's so many people that are good. There's an interesting woman named Monica Bielskite who is a futurist and a designer, and she really talks a lot about accessibility and inclusion in our future scenarios, because oftentimes they're hella white. They're just white. And so she talks about how do you solve that problem, which I think she's great. Renee DiResta, who I mentioned in my talk, I think is one of my favorite people, and like she's such a big thinker, and I like the direction she's going. There's so many wonderful, wonderful people who are trying to fix tech. Tracy Chow is another one who's doing a startup called Block Party, who I really admire a lot. So many. I think there's an unlimited list of people, which I can easily send you my list of smart thinkers and speakers, if you're interested.
That's what makes this project so interesting, that the list never ends. Thank you so much, Harper Reed, for joining Heja Framtiden.
Thank you.
And thank you, Internetstiftelsen, Internetdagarna, Internet Foundation, and Internet Days in Stockholm 2019. Check out hejaframtiden.se. Follow us on social media. My name is Kishan von Essen. Thank you for listening.